President Ramaphosa made another speech that once again proved and showed us that no one is in charge.
This evening, on a matter that has deeply saddened and distressed many people in our nation. Across the country, there has been a rise in reported cases of foodborne illnesses and deaths. A number of people are becoming severely ill and even dying after eating contaminated food. It has been found that some of the food items would have been purchased from spaza shops and street vendors. Since the beginning of September in 2024, there's been a total of 890 reported incidents of foodborne illnesses across all our provinces.
He made another speech to show us that he is only playing catch-up and not getting in front of things, that he only wants to solve things after the fact when they have been so detrimental that they cannot be undone.
These residents are up in arms and accuse foreign shop owners of selling food that allegedly caused children in the area to fall ill. Delportswap residents claim some children became ill after buying snacks from some foreign-owned shops. They say 450 residents signed a petition to demand immediate intervention.
President Ramaphosa made another speech that shows us that no one is in charge and no one is coming. They don't care about the children, they don't care about the citizen, and they don't care about the country.
Northern Cape Premier Zamani Sol, along with several MECs, will participate in a raid of spaza shops in and around Kimberley today. So this initiative follows an incident earlier this week in which a child discovered a pill inside a packet of biscuits. Premier Sol has expressed concern about the quality of food and the production standards of items sold in spaza shops.
President Ramaphosa showed us again that no one is in charge and no one is running this place properly, that anyone can just do whatever they want over here. Government in name only because no one is in charge. President Ramaphosa is supposed to be in charge and is supposed to be the person who directs our great country. But our great country is rudderless and without direction, and anyone can just do whatever they want, even to the killing of children, the stealing of minerals. No one is in charge, and the person who's supposed to be in charge is a useless coward.
One of the reasons that people use pesticides for is to deal with rat infestation or prevalence. The problem of rat prevalence or infestation is due in part to poor waste management in several areas where our people live. Rubbish is not collected regularly. Streets are not cleaned as they should be, creating conditions for rats and other pests to thrive. Often the poorest communities are the worst affected.
The sort of coward who, rather than fixing his country and preempting things to make sure that the countries run well, would leave a porous border and let children die. That's Cyril Ramaphosa. No one is in charge here. So much of a coward that he needed the Government of National Unity and the DA in particular to light a fire under him for him to do something. He needed children to be dying by the hundreds on television from eating snacks for him to do something. No one is in charge. No wonder the country is rudderless and without morals and without vision.
Take you to Mamelodi, that just outside of Pretoria, where some spaza shop owners are worried that they may not be able to meet the 21-day deadline to re-register their establishments, as announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa. They want government to extend the deadline by 3 months. They're hoping that this will give them time to make the necessary arrangements.
Cyril Ramaphosa is not a leader. He's a politician. He's an ANC member. No one is in charge, and it is quite visible. Now he wants to step in front of the camera and look like he's doing something. Where was he this entire time? And you know how we know that no one is in charge? Because no one really believes he can do the things he says he's going to do.
The following measures will be implemented with immediate effect. To get hazardous pesticides off the street, we now have directed that the spaza shops, which have been implicated in the deaths of children, must be closed with immediate effect. All spaza shops and other food handling facilities must be registered within municipalities in which they operate within 21 days from today. Any shop that is not registered within 21 days and does not meet all health standards and requirements will be closed. The South African Police Service and other law enforcement agencies will be required to investigate, to arrest, and to prosecute offenders. This will involve close cooperation with all registered manufacturers, retailers, and suppliers. Integrated multidisciplinary inspection teams will undertake compliance inspections of food handling facilities, manufacturers, distributors, wholesale and retailers. This will include spaza shops as well as general dealers.
No one believes that he can actually do the things he is promising in this speech. No one believes that there will be inspectors to inspect spaza shops. No one believes that it is practical to have all spaza shops registered in the next 21 days. No one believes this man because he has failed at every turn, because he's not in charge and doesn't know how to be in charge. Cyril Ramaphosa is a failed president of a failed liberation movement that could not become a leading political party after they were left the infrastructure and the systems of a high-functioning nation. Conclusion: vote Cyril Ramaphosa out. Alternative: vote in a conservative party of people who are committed to the economic and social flourishing of this country, because then someone will be in charge. When you have people that actually believe in this country, someone then will take charge. A saying: if you want to have order in the Commonwealth, you first have to have order in the individual soul. Russell Kirk. I recommend, if South Africa is to have a better future, you must vote in a conservative government that does not look at the death of children as the price of doing business. The case is closed, my friend. Cyril Ramaphosa is a president, a coward, a loser, a liar, a man of no vision, and he's definitely not in charge. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. Thank you for listening. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description. As we sit here just over a month away from Christmas, here in 2024, I'm reminded that 40% of the South African population receives a social grant, lives off a social grant.
South Africa is regarded as the most unequal society in the world, and the gap between the rich and the poor continue to widen. Compounding the problem is the high unemployment rate, which currently stands at 32.6%. Experts say the social grant system is insufficient to keep people from poverty, and that this is likely to create intergenerational poverty traps.
50% of households in this country, by the logic of the ANC over the last 30 years, 50% of households receiving benefit from social grants, 40% of our population living off a social grant.
So the grant system is really a key part of government's anti-poverty strategy. Our estimates show that about 6 million people are lifted out of poverty because of those small amounts of grants that get paid to those 18 million beneficiaries every month. So it is an expensive system. It is one of the biggest grant systems in the world, but we think it's a particularly effective system in terms of addressing poverty, given that 6 million people are then found to be non-poor because of the grants.
Stop the cap. Stop the cap right now. Stop the cap.
At the start of the program, only about 7% of the people in South Africa received this. Now it is higher than ever, with nearly half the population living daily off social grants.
Rebecca Sebulai and 4 other members of her family depend largely on one old age social grant. It's augmented by the child support grants for the family's 2 children. The child support grants go to the children's school needs. Sebulai says the money barely covers their monthly needs, which include food, electricity, funeral policies, clothing and toiletries. She says the grant is not enough to cover her medical fees.
If social grants could fix a country, South Africa would be utopia. It would be the perfect place. If social grants could fix a province, the Eastern Cape, which is the worst performing and poorest province in the country, if social grants could fix a place, that place would be fixed, because 65% of those people are going to spend their Christmas with social grant money.
It's important to think about, where does the grant money go? A lot of it, of course, is used directly on the child to pay for school fees and to put food on the table. But we also know that women quite often use these grants, for example, as taxi fare to go and look for jobs, or to pay other people to look after their children while they're able to work. So there's quite an important dynamic to you're either receiving a grant or you're in the labor market. But in fact, it's important to think about the grant as a springboard for entering the labor market.
Social grants are not a replacement for building an economy, for building an actual functioning country. Social grants are a way for government officials to get their hands on the purse of South Africa and to keep society under their control. Because how easy is it to control someone who is so dependent on 460 Rand every month from the government, or 350 Rand every month from the government?
Welcome back. Now, the unemployment rate has decreased to 32.1% in the third quarter of 2024, and that's down from 33.5% from the previous quarter. And despite the slight decline, the country's unemployment rate remains stubbornly high, with 8 million people unemployed.
In 2020, when the SRD grant started, Cyril Ramaphosa hailed it as some great intervention. People were calling the SRD grant the Ramaphosa grant, and it was not a compliment. He turned it around into a compliment. That is ANC logic. To him, when people are groveling for 350 Rand, he's doing his job. And it's a vote getter, especially from fat, black, poor single mothers. It is a definite vote getter, because Cyril Ramaphosa is their husband and he makes sure to pay their child support every single month. Well, most months.
And for women, I mean, according to your research, I understand, Prof, that women are more, prone to being, affected by poverty than men. And we see this in most households headed by single mothers, women who have so many children, or even women who are taking care of the community, who are also feeding other kids. How important is this social grant in intervening into their autonomy and their lifestyle and their decision making?
Thank you. Yes, so I think that's something that in the past we haven't always then drilled down to say who exactly is it that's receiving the money. And the fact that for the most part the grants are going to women, 60% of old age pensions go to women, not to men. 96% of child support grants go to women, and so that gives women at least a small amount of money which they can call their own, and so we know that then promotes decision making within the household. It increases women's bargaining power, and it gives them some access to money, which they can then also use towards other economic opportunities.
This is how 40% of our population and 50% of the households is going to spend their Christmas living off social grants. Can you see that this is a country that is depressed? This is a country that is desperate. This is a country that is not growing fast enough, and hasn't been growing fast enough for at least the last 15 years.
We have a new course available for our boys. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18. It's called the Men of the Bible course, Manhood, Masculinity, and Becoming a Man. We take the boys through 12 stories of men from the Bible, pulling out negative lessons, positive lessons, and then one major lesson. We round off each lesson with notable points
on doctrine and theology. We need our young men to become men. Subscribe to the channel. If you don't, I know you're the one that burnt down Parliament. If social grants could fix the country, this country would be fixed. Because about 30 million people receive a social grant, this place should be a utopia if social grants could fix the country, and individuals and families should be heading towards Christmas, looking forward to it, with their children beaming and laughing and happy. They're beaming and laughing and happy, all right, but they're still groveling in poverty.
After getting her children ready for school, they had soft porridge for breakfast. But their grandmother is worried as to what they will eat when they come back from school, because there is very little food in the house. With her little old age grant, Sebolai says she has no choice but to spend only onto the most basic necessities.
O reka 10 kg ya papa, o reka sepa se se tlajwang, o reka se se tlapang, o reka dilonyana tsele e be ebile e hedile. And ha e hela jalo le dijo tse ga di hela tsontso ye go go matshonisa kgotso ye go di taxopo ga e kgone ga e kgone.
The ailing Sebolai has an uncontrollable cough. Her only remedy is hot water, as she cannot afford to see a doctor.
That's the South Africa we live in. That's the Christmas we're heading towards. All while the tax base is getting smaller. Social grants are not a way to build a country. Instead of improving the education system and the health systems, which are dysfunctional, you give more social grants. The answer is not grants, but to the ANC, the answer is always social grants. They're out of ideas and are wasting our time. The solution is simple. Get rid of social grants. You can get a grant only if you're going to study, only if you're going to get a skill at tertiary institution, skills college, or you're going to do some sort of program. That's the only grant we ever give. And you get that grant and some living expense money. And you can only get it one time. The rest is up to you. That's the sort of social grant a conservative would put in place if there was any grant at all. What we're doing now is high-tech enslavement and slavery by stealth. A saying, you cannot make heaven on earth, but we may make a hell. Russell Kirk. I recommend South Africa moves towards the sort of grant that is an education grant that you can receive only once, and it gives you living expenses, and the idea is get yourself a skill, get yourself a job. We cut down grants altogether, and we build an economy by getting rid of minimum wage, turning to a flat tax of about 15%, throwing BEE into the dustbin, and many other things such as that. Getting government out of the business of creating jobs, and they should just run the military, the police, and the courts, and then perhaps we'll be on track for a better Christmas for South African citizens. The case is closed, my friend. Social grants have been a failure from day one. They are permanent now, and they are permanent in killing ambition, in keeping people in poverty, and keeping tyrants in power. Thank you for listening. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. So what kind of backward strategy is it when you leave the most dangerous and the most restless part of your society and you don't put them into productive work?
Zweletu Zonda is a natural salesman. He gets by selling goods from the back of his friend's vehicle.
Becomes a problem now of survival to say, now if I don't do this, what am I going to do, you know? And then that's when the crime mindset starts coming in. That's when the negative things starts coming in. So we need to always try and keep your mind in a positive state, you know.
And you take the least productive part of your society and you give them so many incentives and so much free money that they have nothing to do but be less productive. That's what South Africa is doing. They're taking men of working age and making sure that they have nothing to do, no job prospects to go into or to speak of, and leave them wandering the streets at 10 a.m., which is of course a recipe for a good country, isn't it? Will they not make more babies? Will they not start committing crime?
24-year-old Katliso Malebo obtained a diploma in electrical engineering at the Central University of Technology in Bloemfontein, Free State. Despite having the qualification, Katliso has not been able to get a job for the past year and a half. The young engineer says he cannot even get an internship. He says politicians should concentrate on creating opportunities and economic growth and less talk.
It's kind of depressing sometimes. At times you feel bad and you don't feel like you have a purpose. So
when some of the men who are in their 30s now have never worked since they've left school, there are less jobs than people leaving school being created. This is structural unemployment.
Remember these cues. These were some of the scenes we saw on Youth Day this year when thousands of young people turned up to apply for jobs in Gauteng. They were responding to the Jobs Fair campaign launched by the province for 8,000 available positions. To date, an overwhelming 1.2 million people applied, and Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says this is the true face of unemployment.
Where you have a long-term chronic problem of unemployment of a large share of your population, and many of them do not have the skills to get the sort of work that is available. There's a skills mismatch where many South Africans have low to medium levels of skill and the jobs that are available are for high-skilled people. Then you add the illegals onto there. What kind of strategy is that for building a society?
That for the 8,000 posts that we've advertised, we've received 1,230,092 applications. Of the 8,000 posts that we've advertised, we've received 1,230,092 applications.
Add to that the least productive people in your society, which are usually the women and the children, you give free money to, and you say, go ahead, be a grant diva, living off the social grant, and bring up your children on under 500 Rand a month. This is what has happened in South Africa over the last 30 years, and we've pushed out the most productive people, the working age man. If a man is wandering the streets, trying to find something to do, trying to find a way to earn money at 10 a.m. in the morning, you are not building a society. You have a chronic unemployment problem.
Lesufi says placing the 8,000 people into the various jobs will not be based on anything else apart from skill. The application process ends this weekend and will be followed by rigorous interviews to determine those best suited for the positions. Those who aren't successful this time around will sadly be over 1 million. Need not despair. The Premier says the province will soon open up thousands more jobs.
And the citizens don't get away with this either. If you are a 10 a.m. man walking the streets of your dusty township without a job, without food, and without money in your pocket, and you're relying on a social grant to feed your child born out of wedlock, you've also made mistakes. And then you still vote ANC.
We have a new course available for our boys. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18. It's called the Men of the Bible course. Manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. We take the boys through 12 stories of men from the Bible, pulling out negative lessons, positive lessons, and then one major lesson. We round off each lesson with notable points on doctrine and theology. We need our young men to become men. Subscribe to the channel or Cyril Ramaphosa will be president forever.
The overwhelming response from young people to the Gauteng Jobs Fair last month underlines the unemployment crisis facing South Africa. The country's official unemployment rate sits at 32.9%, but is much higher among the youth at a whopping 70%. Over 1.2 million people applied for the 8,000 jobs advertised by the Gauteng province on June 16th.
And when you're standing in that line, and as a working age man without work, with a grant diva for the mother of your child, and a child growing up on the government teat on social grants, you should ask yourself why you believe the ANC and keep voting for them. Why you let them bring illegals into your country? Why are you letting people like Julius Malema give you the white monopoly capital treatment and give you that as an excuse while they take money from white monopoly to fund their little organizations?
Uzoithola kanjani uhlele khoneni? A popular phrase among young South Africans, loosely translated as how will you get what you want by sitting on a street corner. Thousands of young people have taken this to heart as they navigate the ever-changing economic hardships.
Men, instead of being productive, waiting on government and social grants, having been raised by women who were living off social grants. That is not a society. The South African government for the last 30 years has been investing the money in the wrong place. It's been investing the money in the least productive people, which is the women, specifically single mothers and old grannies, to raise bad children. This is a very bad place to invest it. Where South Africa should take the turn now is invest its money not in the least productive people, but in the same people that have always moved society forward. The people who are the most productive in any society all the time, at all times, no matter where you are. And that is the working age men. They move the society forward. They are the natural leaders of life, and they are very dangerous and very restless when they do not have work. Let them put their energies into work and let us invest in them and not in our women that much. Because when you invest in the men, who do you think the biggest beneficiary is? The people who are the biggest consumers, which is the women.
Kwena Rapia completed his studies at the University of the Free State in 2014. 2 years later, he's still struggling to find a job. Kwena has a postgraduate degree in soil sciences.
I just wake up a day. I just go to an internet cafe and then just Google search environmental companies around South Africa, and then I just submit my CV. Even though there's nothing, but then I just submit my CV. This is who I am, I have this degrees, I have this experience, I like to work for your company, and then no one says anything. And then
if men do not have jobs, you have less of them getting married and building families. Not good for society, which leads to single mothers raised on the government, raising bad kids that are bound for prison. We need to invest our money in the right place. We cannot continue with a chronic long-term structural unemployment. The conclusion is very simple. A government that is serious about rebuilding South African society would turn its lens away from the women and away from social grants and turn onto investing into the young men through, of course, education and a nationwide skills and training program. If you're going to spend your money in some sort of a grant, that's where it should go. And it should prioritize men. Every right is married to a duty. Every freedom owes a corresponding responsibility, and there cannot be genuine freedom unless there exists also genuine order in the moral realm and in the social realm. Russell Kirk. To turn South Africa around, I recommend we turn our investment strategy in our society towards men and young men in particular. And the first way you do that is you end social grants and you bring in a nationwide skills and training development plan. That's what the grant should be. The case is closed. You cannot build a society by not creating jobs, alienating your young men, bringing in actually legal aliens, and then putting all your money into social grant divas and their badly raised kids. Don't be ridiculous. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out.
Magwala, cheche, cheche, Hoya Rona,
Thank you for listening. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description.
The Umkhonto Wesizwe Party has outlined activities and programs for its first year anniversary celebrations in December. MKP Secretary General Floyd Shivambu outlined the events that will be held around the country.
The end of the 30th year as a democracy of a new South Africa, we also faced with another anniversary, 1 year of the MK Party.
Umkhonto Wesizwe's first anniversary program will be here in Moses Mabhida Stadium and will be addressed by our Commander General, President Jacob Zuma. So we chose the region of eThekwini because numerically it contributed the largest number of votes to the votes that overall Umkhonto Wesizwe received in the 2024 general elections. More than 600,000 people here in the city of eThekwini voted for Umkhonto Wesizwe.
As these two anniversaries collide and this year comes to an end, two roads diverging in a wood, socialism or capitalism. And we've been facing this and battling this for 30 years now, perhaps even more. Down the capitalist road is a GNU or perhaps another party that may come in the future. Some would say a rise of a general coalition between a whole grouping of parties in South Africa. I would say what is necessary is definitely a conservative party. That's the capitalist road.
Former President Jacob Zuma's MK Party says its eyes are now fixed on the 2026 local government election. The party, which had challenged the outcomes of the general election, obtained the most votes in KwaZulu-Natal with 54.3%.
And down this road to the left, we are faced with that enemy that stalks every good country, that hollows out democracies with starvation and death, and that's socialism. And that's the MK road, with Floyd Shivambu at its head, a chief socialist and a socialist down to the core, a filthy, rotten socialist, because there is no other type.
We have secured and paid for the stadium, and we are busy with all the logistical issues that are going to define the celebration of Umkhonto Wesizwe's first birthday. And we also are mandated to announce by the Treasurer General that there is 135 hospitality suites here in Moses Mabhida Stadium, and then that we're going to make 85 of those suites available to those who would want to utilize the hospitality services of Moses Mabhida Stadium. And such is going to happen at a fee which is going to be announced publicly in due course, with the details of just what is going to happen in that regard.
South Africa has to make a decision. We are always in between these two polar opposites, to either go down the path of freedom, capitalism and growth, or the path of oppression, socialism and stagnation.
Gulags were nightmarish prisons containing anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 prisoners apiece. If you were unlucky enough to find yourself as one of those prisoners, you would be subjected to backbreaking labor, brutality, extreme weather, starvation, and disease.
South Africa is at a cross point, and these two anniversaries show us this. Capitalism, which has dragged every country that it has ever been applied in out of the mud and into prosperity and civilization, and socialism, which has destroyed and hollowed out every country it has ever been tried in because it doesn't work, where they end up eating their own pets like Venezuela and North Korea.
A few moments later.
Is South Africa going to be a land of free people where every individual is free to make his own decisions, or are we going to be led as a cult for a specific family, the Zuma family, with underlings like Floyd Shivambu working for that family, devoted to power and whatever they wake up thinking is a good idea for that day? Decentralized power or centralized power?
Prisoners were given nothing but salted fish to eat, and the only toilet was a hole in the floor. Many succumbed to dehydration and extreme heat or cold before they even arrived at the Gulag.
And as the country turns 30 years old, it's time to grow up. It's time for the country to choose
properly and stop dabbling between the two. And if you look around, South Africans are not for that socialism because they've had many chances to take it on. Julius Malema has been out here holding rallies and flamethrowing for 10 years with his own little party of fake socialists, and it's gone backwards.
The former chairperson of the EFF, advocate Phila Mpofu, has joined the Umkhonto weSizwe party.
Mpofu joined what was once the third largest party upon its formation in 2013 and served as the chairperson of the Red Berets for 5 years from 2014.
Now, Mpofu's departure marks another blow for the EFF following the former deputy president of the party, Floyd Shivambu's surprise move to the almost 1-year-old MK party.
Now Phila Mpofu, Ubaba and many other miscreants are aligning again to try and drag us out into the cold night of socialism. South Africa has to make a choice once again because we are faced with that choice of freedom and oppression once again, as this country always has been. Whether it's colonialism, whether it was the British and the Voortrekkers, whether it was the National Party against everyone who's not white, whether it's the ANC rule and the honest citizen, whether it's the freedoms we have now gained of democracy and the MK rulership of a crazy old man and his filthy socialist friends. South Africa has to choose.
Subscribe to the channel or you'll be forced to join the MK party and become their most vigorous and fierce member like the Mama Joy of the MK.
We have a new course available for our boys. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18. It's called the Men of the Bible course, Manhood, Masculinity, and Becoming a Man. We take the boys through 12 stories of men from the Bible, pulling out negative lessons, positive lessons, and then one major lesson. We round off each lesson with notable points on doctrine and theology. We need our young men to become men. And let me tell you, the GNU is not going to do it, because the GNU is socialism light. And one thing you will realize if you study history, there is no such thing as socialism light. It always turns into socialism.
With every bit of blood that I have, totally opposed to the so-called government of national unity. Because in my view, it represents 10 steps backward. It represents a total sell-out position where there was an alternative for the ANC at least, to have aligned itself with the progressive forces. And, you know, Mzwai, there are certain things that you might say you are doing for tactical purposes and so on. But there are certain things that you must never do.
It's time to choose a proper system that actually works and reject parties like the MK and their friends, and let the anniversary of the MK be the high point of this party and their best anniversary ever. And every anniversary after this, let it be a slow decay towards irrelevance and non-existence, where they will break up again and Phila Mpofu will have to claim to have started some other party. We need freedom, and we need a conservative party that will maintain freedom, decentralize power, and maintain a thriving and growing economy and democracy. A saying, man cannot improve society by setting fire to it. They must seek out its old virtues and bring them back into the light. Russell Kirk.
From the mood that we have witnessed so far, it's quite clear that people are looking forward to this. In clear terms, we have undertaken as the provincial working team to fill up Moses Mapete Stadium. And we are confident we will fill up Moses Mapete Stadium.
The party says leading up to its first-year anniversary, it will be holding public meetings in Gauteng, Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal.
I recommend we do not move away from democracy, capitalism, and freedom, because two roads diverge in a wood. Never choose socialism. The case is closed. The MK is a cult led by a dirty, sick old man bent on revenge and his little corrupt friends who love socialism. And if you know anything about socialism, socialism is not about the people. It's about power. That's why they love it. That's why it is the animating spirit of the MK. That's why it is the philosophy of the MK. That's why it's the ideology of the MK. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. Thank you for listening. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description. JJ Tabane said a thing.
It's Power to Truth with me on JJ Tabane.
He often says some good things on his show on ENCA called Power to Truth. I still don't understand what the name means. He often says some good things, but he sometimes says things that just don't make sense.
BEE charters. And some of you won't even know what that means because all you know is that BE has failed, it's terrible, it's for the elites and so on. There's no analysis about BE. So let's go back 20 years ago when there was a buzz about change in this country. Right? There was a big question about should international companies also have a BEE shareholding or not?
He sometimes says things that are not so good. This is a terrible idea. What JJ is pushing here is not what South Africa needs because it doesn't work. Indigenization, a process of bringing something under the control or dominance or influence of the people native to that area, that's not what we should do for our economy here in South Africa. And he's been harping on about this for years. It started off with him criticizing how corporates have money in the bank but aren't investing it in the country. He doesn't mention that they perhaps fear BEE, affirmative action and quota system. He doesn't mention that they fear the land reform system where private property is not respected and can be taken away, and it just doesn't apply to land. It can apply to businesses, pension funds, and things of this nature.
And it was a big debate because we were saying some of the international companies were saying no, we don't care, we're not going to come at all to your country to invest should you insist on this so-called BEE.
He always makes it a racial issue as if these companies don't want to invest because there's a black government. Now he's giving a full-throated affirmative to the idea that has sunk many, this indigenization.
Let's face it, the indigenization and empowerment program sounds complex. Community share ownership schemes, employee share ownership scheme, and the National Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Fund. Okay, now let's get rid of all those complex terms and look at the foundations of the policies. Most African countries are rich in mineral resources. The problem is, though, most of this wealth does not benefit Africa. Instead, billions of dollars worth of minerals and other natural resources are pumped out every year, making the companies richer, whilst the owners of the resources remain poor. Africa is the richest continent, its people remain poor. The Indigenization Program is the first African initiative that demands that the people of Africa receive a share of the wealth that comes from their resources. Through the indigenization law, foreign-owned companies have to share 51% of their profits with the people of Zimbabwe.
Firstly, it has economic drawbacks. It reduces economic efficiency. It is a protectionist policy, but not using tariffs or something that might help your country. It often shields inefficient local industries from global competition, thereby making them worse, decreasing their productivity and innovation due to a lack of competitive pressure, which ironically results in higher prices for consumers because the local companies don't have that competition. Once they've signed up with someone from that country, they don't have competition from anyone else, so they can charge higher prices while being inefficient.
But let me tell you something. A couple of decades ago, I was part of a company that tried to open factories and technology transfer and a business, the technology business in Kenya. And that business here at home, they were refusing to transform. They had a lot of excuses. When you say that transform, they say, yeah, but why must we give up, 40% of our company and give it to black people, who didn't work for it? And they were just saying all sorts of disparaging things. Then they go to Kenya, they're trying to expand and then they are told there, no, sorry, you gotta partner with a Kenyan. If you want to do business here, you have to partner with a Kenyan. And they have a word for it. They don't call it BE there. They call it indigenization.
A few moments later.
Protests like this in Kenya have become frequent. This time, they're speaking out against the rising cost of basic food prices. Many people here say life has become unbearable.
Politicians are using this campaign season to promise that they will fix the economy, but many voters are not convinced. They say they are disillusioned and they don't trust their leaders.
Secondly, it limits the capital investment. It reduces foreign direct investment due to restrictive ownership regulations, because not every company wants to just give part of their company to someone they don't know just because they're the right color or have the right passport.
East Africa, where protests are ongoing in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Medics there say several people have been shot dead by police. Earlier on, protesters broke through police cordons around the parliament and entered the building. Part of the site was then set on fire. There have been several days of demonstrations across the country. This is all against planned tax increases. The legislation to introduce that was being debated in Parliament today.
It limits access to global technology and managerial expertise. It decreases capital inflows, hampering economic modernization. This is an idea that sounds good to some people when they hear it, but the reality is it's not a very good idea at all. It's also deeply unnecessary. Subscribe to the channel or Cyril Ramaphosa will be president forever. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. You would rather go fully open and let the economy roar than be limited by some ideological element that will definitely hold you back and has held back many. Third, the technological stagnation sets in. When you follow processes like indigenization, you have limited technology transfer and knowledge exchange. You have slower adaptation to global technology advancements, and you reduce research and development capabilities.
And you either partner with a Kenyan or you ship out. They're not interested in your story. Even if you try to do business here in Lesotho here, they will tell you, oh, linaleba Sotho na, kamo business in Yaluna. It's called indigenization. It's not unique to South Africa. Sometimes South Africans have this so-called exceptionalism. You think you are special, and you're not. In any territory in the world, when you go there to do business, there's an expectation, a legitimate one, that you partner with the local partners, right? And you must give up part of the shares of your business in order to do business in that country.
JJ Tabane and others who are promoting this sort of thinking should stop. This is a limiting idea that limits your industries, that kills your businesses and kills your economy.
Major foreign corporations have been leaving South Africa in recent years, which is worrisome for the country's economy. Major corporations have either scaled down their operations or left the nation altogether, including Shell, Rolex, AngloGold Ashanti, Total Energies, and banking giants such as BNP Paribas and Barclays. Why, however, are these once thriving firms now disappearing? Well, many factors contribute to this phenomenon, such as global restructuring, economic instability, and policy uncertainty. These firms' departure highlights a more fundamental issue, which is a diminishing trust in South Africa's ability to offer a secure and lucrative investment environment. For example, in 2020, AngloGold Ashanti relocated its main listing from Johannesburg to New York and its corporate headquarters to the UK, claiming that there were stronger development opportunities overseas. This pattern, which was already concerning, was only becoming worse.
In India, between 1947 and 1991, India had a licensing Raj, which was an authority in charge of their licensing.
What was the industrial scenario during the license Raj era from 1947 to 91?
In order to keep a control, the leaders, thought leaders of those times, felt it right to keep all the controls with them. So, license quota permit Raj was a measure to control that. So that you assess the market, you assess the survivability of how many players can be there, and you issue so many licenses and allot them quotas so that they will produce only so much, so that you have a handle on how the market moves thereafter. But then there were all other ills of the system, like favoritism, nepotism, corruption, monopolies, wrongfully given favors to some few. And because of all these factors, our products remained substandard. They remained below par, not comparable with international standard. Our processes were not efficient enough. Our processes were not competitive enough. Our technology was not competitive enough. We denied our public the premium things, the premium technology, with the argument that we are a poor country, so this is all we can afford.
India, being what it is now technologically, it took that country backwards because of the sort of indigenization rules that were set in place. South America, Latin America had the same idea with their import substitution regime. It created economically unsustainable domestic industries. It generated significant economic distortions. It led to reduced economic competitiveness internationally. This is what you do when you try and force a system that just doesn't work. And of course, who can forget the land redistribution of Zimbabwe, because that was indigenization and they said it as much. What happened? Massive agricultural production collapse, economic destabilization, and significant reduction in export capabilities. They still haven't really recovered, and now they're paying out the farmers an amount of about 3.5 billion American dollars.
Pierce, good to have you on the show. I'm wondering if this agreement is able to be pulled off. It could be a huge turning point, not only in terms of the current president sort of disassociating himself with Robert Mugabe's policies, but sort of heal some very, very deep wounds in the country.
Who chooses which indigenous people get percentages in those companies? Who chooses who gets the licenses and why? Because they've met certain parameters of indigenization. It reduces economic flexibility in your processes because you have to think of this other thing. As Russell Kirk would say, privilege in any society is the reward for duties performed. We should look at our society. South African society is one that rewards people who have performed their duty, who have done something well, who have been productive and added something to society. We should not be looking to hand out things just because of people's color. I suggest we avoid what JJ is saying in this particular area. This will lead us nowhere. The case is closed. JJ and many others are wrong on this one, and this policy is the policy of the MK, the EFF, and other such backward thinkers, and it will take this country nowhere. As a matter of fact, the conservative thing to do to open up the markets and take out any restrictions based on color and ethnicity. They do not help. That's just not how markets and business works.
We have a new course available for our boys. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18. It's called the Men of the Bible course, Manhood, Masculinity, and Becoming a Man. We take the boys through 12 stories of men from the Bible, pulling out negative lessons, positive lessons, and then one major lesson. We round off each lesson with notable points on doctrine and theology. We need our young men to become men.
Hoya Rona.
Thank you for listening. If you dare, buy us a coffee. The link is in the description. We have a new course available for our boys. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18. It's called the Men of the Bible course, Manhood, Masculinity, and Becoming a Man. We take the boys through 12 stories of men from the Bible, pulling out negative lessons, positive lessons, and then one major lesson. We round off each lesson with notable points on doctrine and theology. We need our young men to become men. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. We have a new course available for our boys. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18. It's called the Men of the Bible course, Manhood, Masculinity, and Becoming a Man. We take the boys through 12 stories of men from the Bible, pulling out negative lessons, positive lessons, and then one major lesson. We round off each lesson with notable points on doctrine and theology. We need our young men to become men.